This week on Quality Digest Live, we look at the benefits of an empowered workforce.
Plus, facing up to your customers' moments of truth. That and more when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for September 4th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. So car buyer satisfaction is down for a third straight year as prices rise and recalls continue, according to new data from the American Customer Satisfaction Index, otherwise known as the ACSI. ACSI. According to ACSI, customer satisfaction with automobiles fell 3.7% to 79 on ACSI's 100-point scale. Among 27 nameplates tracked by the ACSI, 15 lost ground in customer satisfaction and only 2 improved from a year ago, and both of those were foreign-made. The highest scoring automakers remain Japanese and luxury brands in general. Considering domestic automakers only, Ford, which includes the Lincoln nameplate, is the only domestic manufacturer to maintain a high level of customer satisfaction. Ford was at 81 on the ACSI. At the top of the industry overall, Toyota's Lexus hit an 84, taking the lead from Mercedes-Benz, which fell 3% to 83. The following chart shows the 5-year customer satisfaction trends for domestic automakers in comparison with international manufacturers. Now, a couple things to note on this chart. First is the higher customer satisfaction ratings for foreign automobiles over U.S. autos. And we've talked about this before, and the question has been raised, are U.S. cars truly inferior in customer satisfaction to foreign brands, or are they still living down a legacy? In other words, is it really just a perception issue as opposed to an actual fact? Well, if we look at the next chart, this compares actually U.S. automakers, and you can see that Fiat Chrysler and GM kind of speak for themselves. Both have had serious problems over the years, GM in particular, with some notable safety issues, which I think drag down the aggregate U.S. customer satisfaction scores, because if you look just at Ford and look at their scores over those past, 4 years, finishing off this year at, 81, 82, it easily competes in customer satisfaction with foreign brands. So I don't think the low customer satisfaction for U.S. autos in aggregate is a perception thing. I think, aside from Ford, U.S. automakers still really have to get their act together. So if we go back to the first slide, the other thing to note on that first graphic is the decline in customer satisfaction across all brands since 2012. And you might wonder, well, what's that all about? Well, David Van Amberg, ACSI's director, attributes this to today's higher prices and past artificially inflated customer satisfaction due to lower prices starting back in 2009. The idea being that the perception of quality is related to how much you're paying for a vehicle. The less you pay, the better quality you think it is, the higher you pay, the less quality you think it is. So he believes they kind of track each other. And he said this, the government's Cash for Clunkers program helped push driver satisfaction to its highest level ever in 2009. That's what Van Amberger said. He continued, heavy discounting as the economy recovered kept satisfaction up for a while. The customer satisfaction levels the auto industry is seeing now are more consistent with historical ACSI data. So basically, customer satisfaction does tend to follow the economy and pricing. So there's a little bit of, I think, am I getting value for my money? Even if the quality stays the same, as the prices change, that perception of quality may change as well, or customer satisfaction. So.
I think it's funny. When I looked at the chart and I looked at the numbers, so you can see them going down, I had a very different idea that popped into my head. I said, I wonder what's going on in the background. Over these last few years, we see these declines. And one of the things I think is that we've seen a much more prevalent immersion of social media in that time. And I think that we know that in a lot of product-oriented categories, people now are much more empowered to complain about products. And I think that gets into the social understanding of people in terms of what products are and what the value of products are. I'm not surprised that we've seen in autos a significant decline over these past couple of years as people are on Twitter more, as people are able to access Yelp more. I mean, 5-6 years ago, there wasn't as much of this. It really has changed in a half decade. So to me, I think that's a factor maybe too. I know that your source there didn't mention that, but I could see that being a problem too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all feeds into it. I mean, basically, I think perception of a product is your own experience with it. Plus, you are biased and influenced by what your friends think. So you may have one experience with it, but if you're reading on Twitter and Facebook and everybody else is having a negative experience, well, that may tend to bring down your opinion just because we all kind of want to fit in with the crowd. You don't want to be the outlier, so that may temper some of your views as well. Yeah.
You say, I had a great experience with Ford, but my buddy didn't. Maybe Ford's not that good.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever it is. So
I
think that's a factor as well.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. That always comes down to psychology of how customers relate to products. So thanks, Dirk. Okay. How to maximize the risk-reward relationship in corporate settings by Maxine Tong is our next article. It appeared in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. You can see it right there. Now, Maxine Tong is I believe, Dirk, you can help me with this. I think she's a brand new author for Quality Digest Daily. We have not had her right before, and this piece was very well written piece. It really kind of rolled up the sleeves a little bit and looked at this idea of risk and reward within the corporate setting, and I really enjoyed it, and I think that a lot of people did as well. Got very well read, got some interesting comments too. Well, her point of departure in this really was this idea that companies, manufacturing companies in particular, have gathered great rewards with the end-on process, and a lot of us know what that is, and it's where an employee can literally or figuratively kind of pull a cord and stop product when they see a quality issue, and really this started at Toyota, where there literally were cords. I don't know if there still are cords literally at Toyota anymore or on production lines, but there were this cord where a person on the line could say, hey, I got an issue right here with what I'm working on, let me stop the line, and everybody kind of scurries over and looks at what the issue is, and they determine whether or not it's a critical quality failure that can continue the line, or it really needs to be stopped and really analyzed right there and then. Well, something like that is sometimes costly. I mean, if you think about it, Andon works because employers know that the risk of continuing product problems are a lot more expensive if you don't stop that. If you continue doing that when you have a problem, it's going to be much more costly than the cost of pulling the cord and stopping the process. So because of that, because employers understand that the risk of not doing it outweighs the risk of doing it, they accept it. And the other thing is, people that do that or that are on the line understand that they're not going to suffer any reprisal from it. So there's no risk for them to do it, where there may be in some other places. Well, that's in manufacturing. Okay, well, we know how that works. But what about business improvement teams? What about service-oriented industries or in transactional environments? In theory, those people can pull invisible cords and call out issues, but in practice, sometimes there's subtle or overt encouragements not to do so. Again, there's still a schism a little bit here between what a manufacturing environment is like and the risk of continuing to produce when something's not right, versus a service or transactional environment where it's a little more invisible, it's a little more difficult to see, right? Where you think, well, we're producing something, we're producing a service to our customers, yet they can't necessarily see it. So management's going to maybe come down harder on people that want to pull that invisible cord and stop something that they think maybe isn't right. So what Maxine is saying in this piece is that that's not right. You shouldn't do that. I mean, you need to embrace the concept of pulling the cord and stopping, in whatever industry that you're in. And for her, it's all really about creating a place of safety where people can feel free to take chances and maybe to fail without the risk of reprisal. In other words, they can say, this isn't right. We have a problem here. We want to stop this process because we feel like we can do it better, or we feel that it's just not working. And they have to be able to do that, because if you don't, people aren't going to want to do those things, and stuff's going to continue to flow down the line, even if it's kind of an imaginary line. It's going to continue to happen. You don't encourage people to take the time to stop and think about what's really going on. This really comes down to the idea of process redesign. Process redesign, of course, is critical in improvement environments because things change and people change, products change, things are different as they go along, and what works today won't necessarily work tomorrow. Maxine has a good quote here, and it references what this is all about. She says, teams need to discuss taboo topics, question management's decisions, nurture far-fetched ideas, and challenge the status quo. That's a direct quote from her article. What she's saying there is that, again, you need to have a place of safety where people can feel as though they don't need to just go along to get along, that they feel as though they can and should step up and say, listen, we need to change this. And if you don't do that, you're not going to really get the reward of people doing that for your organization. All they see is risk. And again, risk and reward is always part of the equation here. And of course, the and-on core works for workers, but knowledge workers, of course, have fear too. And I think you have to let them know that it's okay to do that. And if you do that, and if you treat them kind of the way that you treat people on the manufacturing line, you're going to reap the rewards whether you're in manufacturing or in service, because people are going to be engaged and they're going to be empowered, is the term she uses, to take ownership of the process and to make sure that it's being done to the best way that it can be done. And that's what you really want out of your knowledge workers, I think.
Right.
That's what she's saying there. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm still a little unclear on how you essentially pull the and-on cord, which literally in a manufacturing literally stops the line.
Yeah.
But I mean, the conveyor belt stops. I mean, the whole ball of wax. I mean, how is she relating that to let's say service workers or non-manufacturing?
Well, she's talking about it within the context of teams and business improvement teams, and saying that you need to create an environment. And she actually didn't use that and-on example. It was subtle within that. She didn't say and-on. I don't think she even used the word and-on the whole thing.
Okay.
But that's really what she's talking about, is this ability for manufacturers to stop the process. And it's an analogy that she's using where she says, well, knowledge workers need to do it too. A business improvement team member needs to feel that they can, raise the hand. I mean, if you're going to make a physical representation of, raise your hand and say, this is wrong. I mean, I know that you're saying we need to do this because the customers think this is what they need. I think that's wrong.
Okay.
And this is why I think it's wrong. And what she's talking about is creating a place of safety where you can do that and people feel like they can do that. Because when you do that, you get the best of those people rather than them saying, I guess that's okay.
Right.
Even though I know it's not okay, but I'm not going to raise my hand and get slapped. And if what I say is actually worse and you adapt it, then I'm going to get fired.
Yeah, so sometimes process
gonna volunteer information then.
Right. I mean, sometimes processes need to be stopped and rejiggered, just in the same way a manufacturing process needs to be stopped and rejiggered.
I would say even more, because it's very clear in a manufacturing process
what's wrong?
When something's not working, it's not fitting, or you're getting error rates, right? I mean, it's a lot more subtle in a service or transactional environment where you're having these problems, and you need to be able to understand that. You need to trust your people. I think this really comes down to a level of trust here, is what Maxine is saying. You need to trust your people to do what you're paying them to do, and to listen to them and take advantage of their experience and the opportunities to improve that they're offering to you. A really important point.
Okay. And thanks to Maxine.
That's right. Really good writer. It was an excellent piece. The first one we run from Maxine, and hopefully we'll have many more from her coming forward.
There you go. Well, I know it's the 21st century at all, but believe it or not, talking to customers face-to-face. Wow, it's still the best way to gather customer perceptions about your product. And that's why 3 or 4 times a year, Ford invites Ford owners to bring themselves and their Ford vehicles to meet with vehicle engineers, as well as their marketing manufacturing teams, to discuss their experiences behind the wheel. The last one, for instance, was in Irvine, California, and it brought together customers who owned various specific Ford models. And the idea was to talk about the technology features such as, let's say, sync or driver usability, design functionality, product appearance, and so forth. And our own Ryan Day writes about this in the article, Going Face to Face with Your Customers. So imagine that. I mean, imagine the value of going face to face with customers for Ford engineers, for example. I mean, to compare to some dry internet survey, a survey that might ask actually exactly the same questions, but it's that back and forth that you get from face to face that you don't get from 1,000 survey responses. Yeah, surveys give you a lot of brute force data, which is important, but you lose the nuance, and that is where the value is in this type of call it a focus group, if you will. So according to Dan Limburner, the America's Product Development Quality Manager at Ford, he says this. He says, externally, we have sources like J.D. Powers, consumer reports, strategic reports, and we also have sources of internal data. Ford has a lot of smart people who can plot out the data, put it into Pareto charts, and slice it up. But until you really understand what the customer means when they check a box, or in the words they write down, it's really not very impactful. The face-to-face gives us much more visceral feedback. And again, that was from Dan Limberger, the product development quality manager at Ford. And I would add to what he says, it also gives you a better understanding of what the customer's journey is all about. I mean, we all, I think, suffer from this problem, not fully understanding the customer's journey, their experience with our products. And not just our products, your products or my products, how these products are delivered, the interaction with the client, those critical touch points that Annette Glenecki discusses in her article, Recognizing Your Customers' Moments of Truth. Now, there have been a lot of definitions about a customer's moment of truth. We've heard that term many times, but I like the way Glenecki defines it. She writes, I usually define moment of truth as a make or break moment in the customer journey. That moment when, if all goes well, the customer will continue the journey and complete the task or interaction and will do or continue to do business with you. If things go awry, he will not complete the interaction and will go elsewhere.
Yep.
So that's the importance of those moments of truth. And the key word in that is journey. What is the customer's journey through the process they use to buy or use your product or service? Those moments when they come in contact with your people or your processes, including automated processes, like a phone tree, for instance. The time to look at this, writes Glenecki, to walk in the customer's shoes, is not after you have invented the product, although that is actually when most of us look at the customer's journey, if we look at it at all. The time to look at the journey, the customer's journey, is before or during the development process. And there's a few ways to do this, a few ways to walk in your customer's shoes, as it were. One is focus groups, like Ford's described above. Let the customer tell you what the journey was like. And another is to simply map out the journey, a simple flow chart. Walk in your customer's shoes. If you were a customer, walk through your process just like the customer would, beginning to end, from when you first hear about the product all the way through to the purchase and delivery. What are the steps you would need to take to complete a transaction? Try to identify all the key points that might make or break that transaction. How would you feel if this step took too long or that step was too confusing? Try to think of all the interactions that irritate you when you buy a product. Are you or your company introducing those same irritants into your customers' journeys? Map it out, flow chart it, see what you find. Take your customer's journey. And that's basically what Annette's talking about in her article, is that customer journey, that customer experience.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it sounds so easy. It really,
but it isn't easy to follow your own process.
It is not, and the reason why it's not is because you
know
invented it.
Exactly.
You know, it's very analogous. We were just having a conversation about this in our office yesterday. It's very analogous to the idea of writing, and this is why it's so hard to edit your own writing. When you write something, you write a 1,000-word article, and you know what was in your mind. Now, it may not have come out of your mind onto the paper the right way. It may not have been understandable, but you know what it was. So when you read it back again, you edit it.
It makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense. You're like, well, of course I know what that transition meant and why I did it that way and what that why I used a comma, not a period there. But not everybody will. So it's really important to get out of yourself. If you can get out of yourself enough to do it yourself, that's great. But you really do need third parties.
Yeah.
You really do need a focus.
Somebody who doesn't know your product or process.
Doesn't know you from Adam.
Frank, do this.
Yeah, and somebody who preferably doesn't know you at all.
Right.
I mean, a stranger is the best one because people that know you, friends and family, will be like, oh, well, I know when Mike does that, he means this. That's not going to help you because you're not going to have a chance when somebody's at their computer wanting to do a purchase to be next to them saying, well, what I really meant was this, obviously, right? You don't have the chance.
Right.
You know, it's actually, you mentioned that it's you know, people deal with these things from a distance through the computer. That makes it way worse. I mean, if you're at least on the phone with somebody, you can say, well, no, I meant this, and they can say, okay, well, when you meant that, we can do this. But when they're just by themselves on the computer, needing to fill out a form, they have no help. Even if you have a chat function or something, they're pretty much on their own.
Yeah, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. And They may bail. And in fact,
they will bail.
They will bail.
They definitely will bail. There's no doubt. And a matter of fact,
there are lost sales because a form is too. I've abandoned sales.
I've abandoned plenty of sales. I mean, I think actually this happens way more than people think. I think people say, well, we probably have like 1 or 2% abandonment. I'm sure it's way higher than that.
Particularly for commodity products.
Yeah.
It's like, I can go over to,
I'll just go to Best Buy.
I'll just go to Best Buy or whatever.
Heck with it.
Yeah.
I think it happens all the time. So I think it's really important that you do that. Map the journey, do focus groups, and get as third of the third parties as you can. Get as distant as you can from yourself and get that information because it's really, really important.
That's right.
To do that. Yeah, good. Thanks, Dirk. Okay. Well, last story of the day, there's an old saying that the only constant is change. And our next guest, I think, would certainly agree with that statement, I would think. Kelly Graves is the CEO of Internal Business Solutions, a consultancy that helps organizations meet and overcome their biggest challenges. He uses his training in psychology to improve his clients' human communications and their processes, the processes that they use to improve those human communications. So his latest article is titled, you can see it right there, it's titled 7 Steps to Better Performance, and it ran in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And in the piece, Kelly really tackles the question of motivation. He specifically tackles how leaders can help coach employees to motivate themselves. And this is a really important issue, I think, because many times what happens is, especially in periods of transition and periods when things aren't going really as well as you want, you need, as a manager, as a leader, I think you need to be able to support your team and give them the information that they need. And it's not always so easy. You think it'd be easy, but it's not really always that easy. So now, to chat with us about this topic, we're very pleased now to welcome Kelly Graves back to the show. So, Kelly, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
How are you?
I've been doing really well. Thank you.
Good. Well, you say in your piece, and this is, I thought this was really interesting. You start off in your piece in the first paragraph and you say, I can't motivate you and you can't motivate me, which I kind of feel is probably true. But given that, given the idea that you really can't motivate someone that well, how do leaders motivate people to, I guess, motivate themselves?
Okay. Well, you have to start from within.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were talking earlier about Maxine and her article. And so it really stems from that. You have to get inside the client's head. So ask them. Mm-hmm. Motivation, if I go up and do a rah-rah, that's great, but it's not going to last at all. Mm-hmm. However, if I ask you, what would you like? What do you need? Involve you in the process of building a better product, a better service, what can we do? That's what's really required. And if you sit down and talk with an employee and say, I want you to give me feedback, and they don't, you have a trust problem. Mm-hmm. So you have to get the trust problem. So in my article, I spoke about that, where went into an organization that we were shutting down and they were merging. And so the first thing that I had to do was just let everyone vent and scream and yell and say, this is so wrong, and just listen before we could ever say, now what are we going to do to solve it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's a lot of leaders, bosses want to tell people what to do instead of saying, what do you want to do? What should we do? How do we fix this problem?
And it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? I mean, what happens many times is I think that leaders many times assume that they have all the answers. So they say, well, they'll kind of listen to what the rank and file are saying, but really they say, okay, well, I know how to handle this problem, and this is the way we handle this problem, and they're going to impose a solution on it. But what you're saying, I think, is that one-size-fits-all, top-down approach just isn't the way to go about it.
Psychologically, it doesn't at all.
Yeah.
It's very archaic. In fact, I'm amazed at how far our technology has grown in the last 100 years and how terrible that the way we manage people. I mean, it's incompetence, because people don't understand the psychology of just how people react. And so even if a leader or manager knows what to do and says, okay, team of 12, I want you to do X, Y, Z. He or she would be much better off, even if he or she has the answer, to say, this is our problem, what do you suggest? Now, it's going to take an extra 15 minutes, but they're going to work through it. They're going to solve that problem. They're going to have the buy-in, and they're going to be off and running. Versus, if I tell them what to do, you'll try to shove it down their throat for 7 years and you won't make it. They won't buy into
I mean,
it.
we're still, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is we're still kind of locked in the old traditional command and control methods. And I mean, it's still after Deming and all these years, it seems like we still are having problems breaking free of that?
Most definitely. In fact, that's what, Maxine's article was very good in explaining this is what we need to do in manufacturing. But I can tell you for a fact that in 10 to 20%, Pareto principle, 80-20, they do that. But I can tell you in the other 80%, they don't do it. In fact, I've had a CEO tell me, we don't have time to do it right. Okay? We have to get it done fast. Now, and also there's this challenge between what the quality manager wants to do and what the production manager wants to do. Yeah. And we've got to get those people on the same page. So, go ahead.
Well, yeah, let's get to that, because that's a really good thing. You started talking about this earlier, where you had this example of you walked into a company that was undergoing a merger,
right?
And it was a very turbulent time in the organization, and there was a lot of people, as you mentioned, who were unsure about their future in the company and their future just as employees. But yet there was this imperative: get product out the door. We got to meet orders. We got to keep going. So, how do you keep people focused on the big picture, which, quite frankly, may not even apply to them in a few months? How do you keep them focused on doing the job at the same time that their job might go away? That's a tough one, right?
It is. And let's go back to honesty. Yeah. When we have that conversation, we're going to say, this is what's happening. I'm a manager. I'm going to get terminated as well. Or I can move to Texas, okay? And so let's have the honest conversation about what we need to do in the next 6 months. Now, we need to still get product out. We're gonna do some training. We're gonna help you transition. That's just a fact. And what I went back to before is that person is angry, so we have to let them be angry. We have to encourage the anger. We have to put them in small groups and say, okay, give it to us. And they will exhaust themselves. Now, once they're exhausted, they've been heard, they vented, now we can have a conversation. Because now in their head, they're not thinking, I hate your guts, okay? So, gang, this is what we have. You can either quit now, or in 6 months, you don't have a job. But what are we gonna do to, go through the next 6 months together? Now, we're gonna help with, training. We're going to try to set you up with other companies. We're going to do everything we can, but this is reality
right now.
And I think when you start engaging people like that, remember, people want to feel valued. People think that money is the biggest motivator. No, it's not. It's number 5, value. I want to feel valued. And when people feel valued, they will involve themselves. So involve your employees in the problem solving. And that's how we get people motivated. Remember, people are self-motivated. People are motivated by self-interest. That's why we want to ask them questions instead of tell them.
I want to touch on something that you just said, because I think this is also a mistake that a lot of companies make, where they incorporate the word of what you just said, but not the spirit. So, I mean, 100%. It's like, oh yeah, vent, yeah, tell us. And so they sit there and so the employees go in, and I've seen this happen at other organizations. So, oh, this is great. So the employees come in and they vent. Now, in the manager's mind or the CEO's mind, it's like, oh, this is great. They're getting it off their chest. I'm just gonna sit here and listen and roll over me. And employees want to do more than vent.
Right.
They want to know that not only have they vented, but you heard what they were venting.
Precisely.
And I've seen that happen, where you have to incorporate the spirit of that. It's not just about letting them vent, which is important, but it's also actually listening to and perhaps acting on the things that they've pointed out, right? I mean, otherwise you lose that respect.
Right. And there's a timing there, and that's why you need the objective person. Just like editing an article, you need that objective person that knows how to create that and how to move those people. So if in an organization like that, I might encourage them to vent a few times over the first couple of weeks. However, if it's somebody where we're already at a different space, I always say 2 minutes. If somebody comes to you and they're griping about XYZ, give them 2 minutes. And after 2 minutes, great, now what are the solutions? Because in 2 minutes you vented. Now we're just griping and complaining. Doesn't do us any good.
Just adding it on,
Yeah, we're
building
just
it up.
spiraling.
We got it.
Yeah.
So
we hear you.
right. So it depends on the gravity of the situation on how much people vent, but you have to know how to coordinate those. And the average CEO doesn't know how to coordinate those. Just like if you sent me in to do an audit on a company, yeah, I've had a few classes in college on accounting, but there's no way that I could do an audit, okay? And people are under the assumption that, well, I know human nature, I read this book, and we let them vent for a little bit, blah, 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 and now what are you gonna do? And if you don't know how to coordinate that, you're lost, and the people will feel it instantly. So that's really the key. It's not just the venting, but now what are we gonna do? How are we gonna involve those people and say, let's solve this and this? And I use what I call acknowledge the obvious. You can only go as fast as the people go. So if you let them vent and you say, okay, let's try to solve it, and they're complaining about something else, you have to know when to either stop that or say, that's important, we'll talk about that later. But your body language, I can still see that there's something wrong. You're saying yes, but you're meaning something else. And we run into that all times in meetings where the leader says, let's do X, Y, and Z. And everyone's going, okay. And they walk out the door and they go, that's a stupid idea. It's crazy. But you got to do it because the boss says we do in that kind of an organization. In successful organizations, the CEO should say, okay, let's have a discussion. For the next 15 minutes, there's no titles. There's no CEO, there's nothing. I want to know the truth. So when we walk out that door, we've got the best solution. And at the end of that 15 minutes, yeah, I'm going to make a decision. But right now, I want to know everything. Give it to me straight. And when you have those kinds of situations, you have a higher probability of success, whether you're on the shop floor or in the executive suite.
Well, Kelly, it's always a lot of information you give us, a lot of good practical stuff, and I think the people appreciate it out there. You're one of our most well-read columnists, I can tell you that, and people really like what you do. So thanks for joining us again. We'll have you again on the show, certainly your next column, so you can look out for that coming up here probably in a couple of weeks or early in October. So that's our show. We were going to do a tweet, but you know what? We don't have time, so we're not going to do a tweet.
We're not going to do
But we'll bring you a tweet next time, I promise. It's better to talk to Kelly anyway. So that is our show. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kelly, for being here again. Everybody have a great Labor Day. Labor Day on Monday, so enjoy that.
That's right.
We'll see you back for 4 days of QDD next week, and of course, Quality Digest Live right back here next Friday. So we'll see you then. Have a great weekend and a good Labor Day.
So long.
Bye.